Please join me in welcoming Lieutenant General Bob Wood, Executive Vice President, AFCEA International, to the stage.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. All right, we hopefully got you coffeeed up. Everybody ready to go for day 3 of MILCOM. We're very happy to have you here with us today. We've had a good program to this point. I know the day today is just set to not only meet, it'll exceed those standards. We've got a remarkable team here to start with from Aberdeen, professionals all, acquisition, program management, a whole host of insights on from software to command and control systems. It's really, I think, going to be a great panel to start today. Of course, we know at noon today our keynote is General Taylor, Commander of CCOM. He'll be with us. And we're happy today to have a moderator that I think has, with 31 years experience in this business, can certainly speak to all parts and pieces. We know the Army is very focused on readiness. We know as well that the command and control systems, we heard from General Crawford yesterday, some of the, he calls them opportunities, and the opportunities to, as he would indicate, really to set the path for the next several decades in the Army, coming out of its years of experience in combat, in operations around the world, and now focusing on a strategy that the Army has for how it will operate into the future. Frankly, to make all that happen, it takes people who understand the program, the processes, and the systems, and that's exactly who we have with you here today. We have as a moderator for addressing this, Changing the Game, C4ISR, Material Integration for Tomorrow's Battlefield, a tremendous moderator, Mr. Larry Mazzello, Deputy to the Commanding General, U.S. Army CCOM. Take good notes because you can ask his boss all the questions you need to ask at lunch today, but Larry is no stranger here in his role as Deputy to the Commanding General for CCOM, having touched many parts of that organization, involved in really a career in the business of putting C4I systems as well as software systems into the hands of the soldiers who are executing the strategy. Over 31 years doing that, his experience is really hard to be matched. Prior to his current role, he was director of the U.S. Army CCOM Software Engineering Center and provided oversight for over 4,000 military, civilian, and industry employees in 5 major locations. All of them professional, ready to go with us today and ready to answer your questions. I'd point out, if you have any questions, ask me, milcom.com, gmail.com. You can see the address up here at the bottom, askmemilcom@gmail.com. They'll collect them at the back. We'll bring them forward in order as we receive them, and we know we have the moderator with questions in hand as well. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage our first panel of the day. You can applaud. Thank you.
Since I'm short and the monitor is probably blocking my view, I'm going to stand. First, I want to thank AFCEA, IEEE, and our industry sponsors. It's through these partnerships that forums like MILCOM are afforded to us and provide a valuable opportunity for industry, academia, professional organizations, and the government to have candid conversations on the current state of military communications and our future needs. So welcome to the panel on Changing the Game, C4ISR Material Integration for the Future Battlefield, or for tomorrow's battlefield, I should say. Readiness remains the Army's #1 priority. We must be prepared to fight tonight. Our competitive advantage, though, is eroding. Our adversaries are rapidly modernizing. We are at an inflection point where we must modernize our capabilities in order to increase our lethality. As General Milley said at AUSA, unreadiness results in casualties. Combat readiness allows us to end the war on our terms. The Army Materiel Command, AMC, is the Army's material integrator, synchronizing capabilities and resources to ensure Army material readiness. AMC is working hard to increase readiness. We're planning for and delivering capabilities to improve equipment operational readiness rates and reduce the logistics footprint and soldier burden on the battlefield while enabling and sustaining an expeditionary force. We're optimizing supply availability and increasing supply chain efficiencies. We are aligning the right equipment, material, and capabilities to ensure the Army's ability to fight and win. We are working on technology modernization efforts while also investing in new capabilities to address the Army's most critical capability gaps. and we are continuing to work with industry to deploy, equip, and sustain our Army. So this panel will briefly discuss and explore Team APG's C4ISR material integration efforts. Our panel members represent a broad range of AMC leaders from across the product lifecycle. Their responsibilities range from basic research, development, engineering, product support, to sustainment, as well as contracting across all of these functions. So let me introduce the panel members. First is Ms. Jennifer Zabosny. She's the Director of the Communication Electronics Command, CCOMS, Software Engineering Center, and is responsible for state-of-the-art software engineering products, services, and sustainment throughout the Army. She supports systems and programs from command control, I'll just use the acronym, C4ISR, to logistics, business, and enterprise resource planning systems. Second is Ms. Liz Miranda. She's Director of CCOM's Integrated Logistics Support Center, ILSC, that is responsible for logistics planning and execution for C4ISR weapon system. She leads the ILSC as the C4ISR National Inventory Control Point, National Maintenance Point, its life cycle and logistics support planning, communication security or ComSec logistics, and C4ISR security assistance to allied nations. Mr. Gary Blom is the Director of the U.S. Army Communication Electronics Research Development Engineering Center, or CERDEX, Intelligence and Information Warfare Directorate. He is responsible for providing signals intelligence, electronic warfare, measurement and signature intelligence, information operations, intelligence dissemination and fusion, as well as quick reaction capabilities through research and development of ISR systems for the U.S. Army. Mr. Philip Perconte is Director of the U.S. Army Research Laboratory, or ARL, which is the Army's laboratory for basic and applied research and analysis. He is responsible for conducting research and analysis in weapons and materials, sensors and electronic devices, computational and information sciences, human research and engineering, vehicle technology, and survivability and lethality analysis. ARL's Army Research Office also executes the Army's extramural basic research program in scientific and engineering disciplines. And our last panel member is Mr. Kenyatta Wesley. He's the Director of the Army Contracting Command, Aberdeen Proving Ground, a major contracting center of the U.S. Army. He is responsible for supporting an Army-wide mission of critical contracting for research, development, engineering, and lifecycle management commands for program executive offices and for institutional Army customers. Additionally, he serves as the principal assistant responsible for contracting for RDECOM and CCOM. And with that, Jen, can you take it up?
Sure. Good morning. I'm also short, but I'm going to stay right here. So what we do, Software Engineering Center, we do software sustainment for systems, like Mr. Mazzella said, across the C4ISR community, primarily POC3T, POIWNS, and POEIS. And what is sustainment? It's really keeping systems relevant, whatever that is. So there are times, in software, you pretty much never test out all the bugs. So we have users in the field, soldiers that do things that we didn't anticipate, and that generates, I'll say, finds problems that were there. So that's one set of things that we do. Keeping systems cyber relevant is really a very big deal. The cyber bar continues to increase, and we have to make sure that we do whatever we need to do to get ATOs. And so that's kind of an ever-changing thing, but that's another area that we work on across the C4ISR systems that we support. And finally, interoperability. So systems change, standards change, and we have to maintain the systems to update against those changes. So there's three things that I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to start with electronic patching. And I think a lot of you that have heard us speak have heard about this. I'm not going to really belabor this one, but essentially, SEC is leading for the Army the migration of patching, vulnerability patching, from how we're largely doing it today, which is we're sending it out on CDs, hard drives, hard media, to doing it electronically over the network. We have 8 systems that are enabled today. We have about 40 or so systems that can be enabled, meaning they operate on a network. And so we're working between FY18 and FY19 to enable the remaining 32. What we're doing right now is looking at, we're going to develop standards and we're going to provide them out to industry so that everybody understands what the expectations are going to be if you get work that involves IAVA patching. So we don't want everybody doing it different. We want to make sure that, number one, we're maximizing the use of the tactical network, so we're not doing it in ways that overstresses the tactical network and overuses bandwidth. We want to make sure we package them the same. We want to make sure users download them the same. So we're building that set of standards, and that's something that we will be providing out. The other piece is the end-to-end solution. So the patching is a big component of it, but how do we manage those patches? Or if APG is like Patch Central, what do we use to manage those patches to make sure that they're getting all over the world, right? Because we have units everywhere. So what are the tools? What are the processes? What do we need to make sure that that works? It's really the end-to-end solution. We're looking at that. That's something that I think we're going to need help with. So that's kind of what I've got on electronic patching. The second point is efficiencies and effectiveness in software development. So we are in the midst right now at SEC of rolling out a DevOps environment. We have a very solid plan. We've selected tools. We're moving out. And by the end of FY18, we will have DevOps standardized across the center. What we don't really have, and I think is equally important, is a process and best business practices. Because we can roll out all these tools to people, but if we don't really tell them what to do with the tools and how best to use them and what is the process that we're all following, I don't think we'll succeed. So that is something that I think for industry who develops software would be very useful for us to hear from you guys. We've actually had a couple of industry partners that have come in the past month or so and just really kind of shared how they do business. What is the process that they follow? What works, what doesn't work. So I don't really want to reinvent the wheel, so that's something that we're really looking for help in. If you can help us, please let me know. Final talking point is COTS licenses. So we have the cost of license maintenance, I won't skirt around it, it's unaffordable. I mean, and it grows exponentially every year. Every year we transition new systems in. I understand, I mean, I came from the PEO side, so I completely get why we select COTS in some places, but I will tell you, these systems that are in the field for 20, 30 years, when you add up the bills of the license maintenance over the course of that life cycle, they're large. So I'm not sure how to solve it. I'm looking for help. If there's anybody out there that can help us to figure out how we get a handle on it, because we are really kind of facing a situation where most of my POM money is going to go to license maintenance. And so all those other things I talked about that we need to do, we're not going to be able to afford to do them. And that's not really an acceptable place to be. So ELAs, all of those things we're pursuing. If there are other ideas out there from industry members in terms of how to try to get a handle on this, I am all ears. We are looking in some cases at some of the products that are very expensive. We're looking at alternate solutions. So we're working with the PMs and looking at some different packages in the labs that may be cheaper. And so even though it's a COTS product, it's a different COTS product. And that may be an avenue that we have to pursue. So again, looking for help. If anybody can give us ideas, we're very open to that. That's all I have. So Liz, you're next.
Oh, thank you, Jen. So good morning, everyone. I'm glad that you were able to join us this morning. So Jen's organization focuses on the software in support of the major weapon systems, C4ISR, so command control, communications, computers, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance systems. My organization focuses on the hardware. So before I start with more specific talking points on some of the initiatives that we have put in place, I want to give you just the scope of our business or the scope of the mission that we execute in support of our Army. So from a hardware material integrator perspective, we provide global logistics support for over or almost 1,800 C4ISR systems, to include the management of the repair or secondary parts or components of those systems at a rate of about 42,000 items. So that's a big scope of managing this inventory for the Army and sustainment of the major end items. Our responsibility expands from radios, night vision devices, to communications security or ComSec systems, to systems that support major Army platforms. For example, Patriot, tanks, aircrafts. We have systems that are on the aircrafts, radars, etc. So the scope of our support is pretty big, which adds a complexity to our mission. So how do we do this, right? How do we sustain the hardware of these major end items and keep our Army ready to fight? Some of the challenges in sustaining such a complex or large C4ISR portfolio includes the continuous evolution of technology, which adds, since we sustain or keep our systems in the inventory for so long, right? Some of the systems we still use today have been in the Army's inventory for 20, 30 years. So how do we keep up with technology and advancements and ensure that our industrial base stays viable, right, in support of these programs? So although we maintain an operational readiness of these systems of approximately, in average, 97%, between 95 and 97%, our supply availability has gone down, and it's certainly not optimized today. So that is one of the specific things that I want to share with you this morning as to some of the things that we're doing and what we're looking for in terms of support that our industry partners can provide so that we can ensure that our systems are ready and our units are able to fight whenever they are called to do so. So some of the things that we have experienced, right? So part of the challenge is the change in up-tempo and how our mission priorities continue to change. Based on that, some of our systems, of course, get used more or are put into an environment that challenges, right, our sustainment strategies. So to be agile and able to, I would say, quickly respond to the needs of our Army, we have taken various steps and put in place some initiatives that are from an acquisition perspective, right, working with material developer, to contracting language that can help us be more agile collectively, to improving our organic industrial base to actually be also responsive, to address obsolescence challenges. So specifically, the hardware strategies are not done in a vacuum. So I'm sitting here between Jen and Gary for a reason, and Kenyatta at the end and Ariel, because it's really a team effort to maintain these systems readiness optimized. So we work very closely with Jen on the software, with Gary on the S&T efforts to ensure that the strategies that we're putting in place are the best strategies from an Army perspective to support the systems that we're responsible for. So I just want to share with you some of the things that we have done to position or posture ourselves to better sustain and keep these systems operationally ready all the time. And then Gary, I'm sure, will touch on some of the initiatives specifically to S&T, and Kenyatta will talk on the contracting specific initiatives and language that we have put in place. So I don't want to steal their thunder. I just want to give you some perspective as to how we are organized and work together and keep our initiatives and efforts synchronized so that it's an efficient strategy and the most efficient sustainment and so it's a synchronized effort, and it's not just a hardware-specific initiative. It's a well-rounded effort to support and improve the operational readiness. So specifically, one of the things that we have worked on and that we're working very closely with industry, those of you that provide supply, secondary items, repair, or provide services to us for our C4ISR systems, we are in constant communication. Because like I said before, our processes today are not as agile as they need to be as responsive as we need to be to support this up-tempo. So what we're working with industry is to improve and accelerate, reduce the production lead time and accelerate delivery of repair parts. That is critical today. Our demand signals are changing constantly. So agility and flexibility to respond to those demand signals is critical. In average today, our production lead time is about 8 months, and we are already behind providing parts for whether it is to replace parts within our systems that are broken and or produce new parts or components for the systems. So one thing that we're working with the contracting team and industry is how do we reduce the production lead time so that we're more responsive. A second thing that we are doing, we're looking to leverage the S&T and R&D efforts to get after obsolescence. There are many challenges because of the portfolio we manage and those technology advances that we continuously see for systems that have been out in the field for many, many years. So we need to have proactive obsolescence management strategies to get after that. So again, working with the S&T community to figure out innovative ways of being more proactive and see what may become obsolete in the near future and have strategies to address that is critical. We're also including contract language to do the same with industry. Industry has to be a partner and help us be more proactive when managing obsolescence as opposed to being reactive. And the third strategy that we are implementing is to work with, like I said, contracting, not just for obsolescence with the CERDEC on the S&T efforts, but we definitely are working to include contract language to get some of the tech data that we need to be self-sufficient, to have the ability to fabricate the parts that we need, and work with industry to improve or increase, I should say, availability and supply sources. Because what we're seeing is, in most cases, we have very limited sources of supply. If that source of supply decides to not produce that part anymore, we have very limited options. So to improve our ability to be more responsive and flexible, we definitely need some of that tech data that will allow us to be self-sufficient, to get after other sources of supply and optimize our supply chain. So those are some of the things that we're doing. Like I said, I'm sure CERDEC and ACC, specifically Kenyatta and Gary, will touch more on the specific things that we have put in place to do so. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks.
So good morning. Is my mic on? Yeah. So as Larry talked about, we do the applied research, the applied sciences technology in the area of C4ISR and also engineering support. So we do provide a lot of engineering support to Liz and Jen. And in this new environment, when we start thinking about a near peer and a contested environment, there's a lot of challenges with that. You know, how can we make sure our network works through that potentially contested environment? How do we gain an advantage in electronic warfare? How do we work in the cyber domain? How do we take all that data from all that and all the sensors we have and make sure we have the right sensors and use that to make decisions faster and using artificial intelligence, machine learning for mission command and intelligence decision making? A lot of things we could talk about with threats and what have you, but so here I am in the CERDEC. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's our role when we talk about sustainment. So what the heck can CERDEC talk about when we talk about sustainment, besides providing engineering support? Well, I would argue we provide the conditions up front through the architectures, some of the standards work that we do, and the decisions we make, even early on in S&T, that will have great impacts on the systems we develop, the sustainability of those systems, the software architectures, and getting after some of the concerns that Jen talked about with licensing fees, and the ability to be agile. And do we add a box every time we have a new capability or need? And every time we add a new box, that's another box to sustain, another set of cables that can break, all those kind of things. So I want to talk a little bit about some of our early upfront architecture work and standards, and specifically something called Cmos. And I have to read this because I can't remember, as I'm getting more seasoned, I can't remember any of our acronyms. Cmos, C4ISR/EW, Modular Open Suite of Standards. Open architecture, open standards. I like to sometimes say, everyone loves open architecture because everyone has one. Everyone loves standards because everyone has one. Well, one of the challenges we have in the Army is picking the standard and sometimes sticking to it for a while. And I know standards evolve and things like that, but we need to sometimes make decisions, and the hard part is how do we get that to work for the long term. And so when we look at technologies, especially in a lot of the areas, when I talk about cyber, signals intelligence, electronic warfare, and communications and even PNT, and for the engineers, the components are the same. You have antennas, you know, RF amplifiers, you have processing. Yet we take these things and we have requirements coming from all different areas. We set up different program offices and we start diverting our solutions to handle one capability at a time. And then we make it even tougher on ourselves because we'll say, well, that's unclassified FOUO, that's secret, that's TSSCI. We just keep on making it harder and harder. So we want to bring that back together, and we sometimes refer to this as hardware-software convergence, and come up with an architecture that will allow more plug and play using commercial standards. And I think that's sometimes the key. Sometimes we talk about what standards are you using. We don't want to make them up, but we do want to make decisions on what those standards are. At the different layers. And we're trying to leverage things like Victory, you've heard of Victory before, the Open VPX Vita standards, and being part of those standards bodies as we move forward. But how do we make those decisions and then execute those, not in a single program of record, but multiple programs of record, that we can have something that's standard across the board. And this is an Army S&T initiative, but I do want to point out that we are making a lot of progress working with the Air Force and the Navy. So the Air Force has their Sensor Open Systems Architecture, SOSA. those things, our goal is that they will be one and the same at the end. I think we're making progress towards that. That's always difficult because sometimes our complexity doesn't come from the technology, but from our organizational structure. And then the Navy hardware open systems technologies, or as they call host. And so we are working with those communities to try to synchronize and have a common set of standards. And so what are some of the other goals that we're trying to accomplish here? Every time a system needs a PNT solution, we add a GPS receiver, we add some hardware to do that. If we have this victory architecture, and we have some RF standards that we can share those signals, let's reduce the number of boxes that are on a platform. Let's come up with some hardware chassis approaches for platform-mounted things where we can also be more agile and let you compete. Because we know one of the challenges we have is we'll build something, and guess what? Tomorrow, somebody else in the audience has something better. Oh my God, how are we going to change it out? You know, the box is built. It's a singular solution. If we have a set of standards where you know exactly how to build and plug and play into that, we can take out and replace. And I do think that helps with sustainment. I think that'll help actually with the obsolescence problem a little bit because we can be more agile in building and inserting capabilities at a lower cost. One of our big challenges when we come up and we work standards, again, is sticking to the decision, but trying to get it right. And so this is where you come in as well. We know that if we go into the corner and come up with all our decisions and just publish it, we're going to screw that up. We need continued input. I think we've had input from many of you already. We need continued input from you on what are our solutions, what are our standards, are we limiting you? If we make a selection, are we limiting you in capability? Not are we limiting you into owning a space. I don't care if anybody owns a space, but are we limiting the competition? Are we making a decision that's going to hit our capabilities in a negative fashion? So we have a team that's working this. We'll continue to work this. We're going to continue to be on the standards bodies and the commercial standards bodies to make sure they incorporate the things that we believe we need. We're getting a lot of traction with the PEO community for this to become a standard. Of course, I realize, as anybody else, that it doesn't mean anything until an RFP says that you shall. But we are working with industry, and I'll tell you, a lot of you out there, and some people that may not be here today, are starting to build products into this architecture, because I do believe that's another way to make this happen. If industry embraces this, it'll be easier for me to convince senior Army leaders that this is the way to go. And again, one of our challenges is we have multiple programs of record, multiple contracts. We kind of make the same decision over and over again. And can we standardize on the standard, if you will? And so I look forward to your questions, and I'll hand it off to our partner. And as a plug for Phil before he talks, when you talk about research, from the basic to the applied, and eventually getting to programs of record, if we're not working together, things are very inefficient and they fall on the floor. So, Phil?
Thanks, Gary. So it's a pleasure to be here at Milcom 2017, and Gary stole my thunder because he's one of my most important partners in this initiative. And actually, to my left is another one of my most important partners because we can't do anything without a contracting command. And so, for us, really is a team environment. So you might be asking, why is the research guy up on this panel? And it's really to give you an indication of how we, in the Army view this life cycle, everything from basic science all the way up to sustainment and test. We're a very tight, intimate community. And as Gary said, collaboration is key, and I want to make a few points about that because everyone in this audience we view as a collaboration partner, and it's the reason we come to these events to really engage with you and get your understanding of the problems that we're involved with based on what you hear. So if you don't know about the Army Research Lab, we're about 3,000 people, 2,000 government scientists and engineers, another 1,000 contractors We're about $1.2 billion a year in mission funding and work for our customers. And we're the corporate laboratory, so we span just about every commodity that the Army is engaged with. Most importantly, for this panel in particular, our primary mission is discovery and innovation and transition of science and technology. So discovery is really about breakthroughs, right? What are the knowledge gaps that limit our understanding and our ability to deliver and transition technology? And most importantly, things like C3I in the network, which is one of the Chief of Staff of the Army's major priorities these days. If any of you went to AUSA, you'll get an understanding of how important the network in C3I is to the Army writ large. So for us, it's really about what are the knowledge gaps? Where can we help solve problems? Where can we help innovate through connections of ideas and bring those ideas to our partners at CERDAC and up the food chain so that we can accelerate technology transition. As I mentioned, it's a highly collaborative space. So ARL has an initiative we call Open Campus, which allows us to partner not only with our academic collaborators, but also our industrial partners in a manner that gives us an opportunity to work closely together, actually side by side. We have many researchers from academia and many partners from the industrial side that come and sit in our laboratories and work side by side with our research staff. We send research partners out to academic institutions, and we send our partners to industrial locations as well. Highly collaborative. Get in on the ground floor before there's ever a program or record so that we can actually talk science, technology, capability gaps, limits of our understanding. That's the real value from an industrial point of view. I want to encourage you to think about that. The other thing is we have extensions across the country now. ARL has a laboratory in California, Southern California. We stood one up in Texas. We just opened one in the University of Chicago, and we're going to put another one up in the Northeast. All of this is to provide us with an opportunity to be very close to our collaborative partners, to get into innovation hubs across the country, and more importantly, to expose the rest of the country to the Army's problems, the Army's needs from a technology perspective, and again, to really expand the ecosystem for science and technology, because the complexity of the problems today drive us to be interdisciplinary and cross-disciplinary across many, many domains. So I just want to end with a couple of comments about additive manufacturing. So from an additive manufacturing point of view and a sustainment point of view and the ability to bring additive manufacturing to the point of need, this is an area where there's plenty of interest these days in the Army. You heard from the sustainment side this notion of how to accelerate parts, how to get or obsolete parts to the battlefield faster. All of that can be improved with additive manufacturing that's integrated into the supply chain. But we are a very long way from having that occur. And Gary talked a little bit about standards. So can you think about the vision of the future where we have a standard library that a soldier can pull down a part that can then be additively manufactured or 3D printed right on location, can really circumvent many of the long poles in the supply chain that we see today. But you can't do that if you don't have the technology to get you there. So we think about 3D printing today in the state of the art. Everyone does 3D printing, but mostly it's about the design and build of plastic parts. You know, the next generation of 3D printing you'll see is a design and build of metal parts integrated with plastic parts. And then the next generation you'll see is the design and build of plastic, metal, and electronics, all coming out of the same plant, if you will. The notion, though, that those parts will be qualified, the notion that those parts will have the same physical properties as a part that was manufactured out of, say, bulk metal, none of that is put to bed from a science and technology perspective. So that is really, from my perspective, where the research has to go. How do we get to the point where we understand the physical limitations of 3D printed material, the microstructures of those materials, where they fall down, how they don't meet standards, how they can be robust across a very broad military domain from temperature to environment. And then ultimately, how do you put that into the supply chain and get it to the point where when a soldier 3D prints a part, he can trust it for a long period of time. That's where the research is going, and I think you'll see it. It'll be 2035, 2040, but eventually we'll get there. And I'll stop with that. Thanks.
So I'm the guy who has to follow all these smart people. And my job is to try to summarize this in a manner in which is relatable for industry and how we get it to you. And so what I would tell you is, from a contracts perspective, my number one job is to understand where my customer's going, understand what their needs are, all right? Whether it be understanding Jen's software licensing problems and challenges from a financial standpoint, whether her driving towards a more open architecture solution, government-owned rights solution, whether it be Liz's sustainment challenges, all right, and understanding what her needs are from a technology improvement area, whether it be understanding parts obsolescence and what kind of contract language goes into the contracts to prevent those challenges from happening in the first place. Whether it sits down with Gary and understanding the different technology challenges he's going to incur when he's trying to improve our network capability, network interoperability, sitting down with ARL and trying to figure out from Picanti where it is he wants to go from a direction standpoint. Where does he want to take the Army and where is he recommending the Army to go? And figure out how to put those requirements in a contractual document that you actually can function with, that you can deliver on. And then from a government standpoint, make sure it's enforceable. That's the unique challenge. All right, we have to make sure that the document's enforceable, but yet executable. All right, and so I would tell you, if I'm sitting here trying to figure out the best way to summarize what contracting is doing for this esteemed panel to my right, as well as for you, it's those two things: making sure the contract is enforceable yet executable. I would also add trying to make sure that contracts are getting out in a timely manner. All right. You hear a term out there called PALT, which is procurement acquisition lead time, and how long it takes from the time these good people to my right give me a package that I can get out on the street and get it awarded, so that way you all can begin working and get cash flow. All right? You ever hear the term cash flow is king? Our job is to try to get it to you sooner so you can begin to get that cash flow in your hands and start making improvements to the network for the warfighter. All right, so I would tell you, how do we do that? That's the question. How do I do that for them and then for you? It's trying to use all of the tools in the toolbox, using the right tool in the toolbox at the right time. So whether it be using our traditional contracting methods of trade-off versus LPTA, whether it be going into an Army trend of improving or in exercising more OTAs and other transactional authorities, whether it be using grants, cooperative agreements. It doesn't matter which tool in the toolbox I have, as long as it meets the need of the government and finds a way to get you into being able to actually execute a contract that we have at a high performance level. And so our job is to try sincerely and genuinely to give you the requirements that are understandable. You heard Gary talk about standards, making sure that those standards are actually livable, all right, that you actually can live up to the standard that's out there. And then also trying to figure out what language that will actually solve our parts obsolescence issues and sustainment challenges, while yet giving wiggle room for future improvement on the research and development side. So I would tell you in a nice, clean nutshell, that's what my job is to come up with contracts that enable all of these good folks to do their mission, yet are actually functionable for you, and yet meet all of our different goals and objectives that the federal government has put upon us, whether it be competition, whether it be small business, whether it be any other challenge or that they put upon us to have to actually meet from a socioeconomic or program metric. We are trying to become a more balanced contracting and acquisition center, so that way these folks have a great place that they can go for one-stop shop. Hopefully that makes sense to all of you. So I'll stop there so we can get to answering a few questions.
Thank you. The first question for the panel. Panel members mentioned to contact them with potential solutions to issues and topics discussed this morning. What is the most effective way to make initial contact to actually set up a meeting to discuss or demonstrate a solution?
So I look at one of our jobs in the science and technology community is to understand what everybody in the industry is doing. Now that's an impossible task, right? You know, 'cause constantly my customers, the PEOs and other folks are saying, hey, do you know, so-and-so talked to me, do you know that? A lot of times our folks do. So if you know any, you could always come through the front door. I have never turned away any industry partner to come see me. So a lot of times it might be a half-hour discussion where I understand what you're doing and I point you to the right group and say, oh, you're talking antennas. Let's go talk to those folks. You're talking electronic warfare. Let's do that. So I do believe there's a lot of, if you know our contact, you can always feel free to contact me. It may not happen immediately. Usually my first step is to give it to somebody that'll keep on my butt so it'll actually happen. But if you see other folks, and there's other SURDEC folks in the room, use any of those contacts to get in. You don't need to know somebody. Go online, go to our websites, contact us. We will get you in. We want to talk to everybody.
So I think the best way, because there's a broad swath of leaders and organizations represented here, is to take it through the ACC, and they can figure out where does the question go. Kenyatta, so do you want to? Or the small business office. Go ahead.
So depending on what your expertise is and where you are. So if you are a small business, my number one place to tell you to start would be the ACC, Army Aberdeen Proving Ground Contracting Office. So I call them ACC just because they help me as well. But they are the Aberdeen Contracting Officer. They work directly for the CCOM commander, and they support all of the Aberdeen Proving Ground. If you are academia, large business, I would tell you have a couple of ways to enter. Try to start with the appropriate contracting officer that's working with that solution. We can get you in to whoever the customer is. All right? That's probably the first and easiest way to start. Now, that does not stop you from reaching out to a customer directly if, here's a caveat, if the actual solicitation or RFP has not been released. If the RFP or solicitation has been released, you come directly through the contracting officer. We have to control the questions and the answers to make sure that we protect the solicitation. So I would tell you, if the RFP solicitation has not hit the street and we are doing market research, then you can go to the customers directly if you know where to go. If you don't, come through the contracting officer listed on the market research, and then we can go out from there.
I'll just say www.arl.army.mil. You can get to anybody in the organization through that website.
Thank you. What are some significant changes in the Army's approach to information warfare across all areas, and how are these changes impacting Team APG?
Integration. It gets back to that stovepipe comment I made before. And now there are certain policies that we'll have to look at as we go forward about authorities to do different electronic warfare, information warfare, cyber effects, both from an offensive and defensive side. But the big thing is integration. And I think what you've seen, and you'll see with upcoming programs of record solicitations, is some of the work we've done in the in the science and technology community has shown the technology ability to do more integration of these capabilities, to not build 3 platforms to do 3 missions. And you say, well, why do I need to prove that? Because there's risk, right? Programs of record, the Army, before they go and spend big dollars on a capability, want some assurance that it is feasible and doable. So I think that's the biggest thing you'll see. You see TRADOC capability managers from Fort Huachuca and Fort Gordon always side by side. I mean, they're almost arm in arm talking about integrated requirements. And as a result, now you see that at TRADOC. Guess what happens at the science and technology community and then the PMs? You see a lot more collaboration. And so it's hard work. I mean, one of the challenges always is the answer is often just communications and talking to each other and getting the right folks to work through it. So I do see the community at Aberdeen Proving Ground really coming together on those kinds of things, which includes the sustainment side. So, when we talk about it, often in the past, we focused on the capability. Can I get a 1/10 of a dB better? Now we're starting to also think about, well, am I making Liz's life hard later in the way we're approaching this?
I would also add one of the challenges is how do we contract for that? If you heard at AUSA, General Milley kept driving us into being able to come up with ways to put contracts together faster, sooner. And so I would tell you that goes back to my previous statement of finding the right solution, the right tool in the toolbox. We have, I will say, tools that are very seldom used that we can go after in order to meet the needs. So whether it be, we sit down, and one of the things that I wanted to drive home here is, we have technology investment agreements. They're called TIAs for short, if you haven't heard the acronym. So many people are focused on OTAs that they forget that we have other tools in the toolbox. And so one of the things we're going to have to do is figure out what technology processes that are out there that'll help us improve. What procedures that are out there from a technology perspective and getting that into our hands quicker. And so I would tell you my challenge is going to be, after they come up with their ideas and their path forward, how do we get it on contract quickly so they can start to execute?
Yeah, and the other component to that, I think, is being cyber ready. And that is hard because we really have not figured out yet how to always predict what that cyber threat looks like and how to harden your systems against it. So that's something that we are working hard to try to get ahead of. But it's one of the things that I think certainly on my side of the house in software sustainment is one of the things, frankly, that keeps me up at night, because those are the areas where we need to make sure that our systems can't be infiltrated by the bad guy, and figuring out the mechanisms to do that is something that is critical to be able to enable that.
Thank you. The next question is, we heard yesterday about problems with our use of data. We collect a lot, but we don't really have good ways to sort what we need to keep from what we can discard. What are your thoughts on how best to optimize our use of data?
So when I talk to architecture, data architecture is part of that discussion. We have, as the question alluded to, we have, sometimes it almost seems like more data than we know what to do with. How do we get through that clutter? How do we figure out not only how to tag that data and have it usable to the decision maker that needs it, but how do we do even some distributed processing to reduce the network load for some of this data that comes through? And then use, even for things like signals intelligence, how do we use more machine learning? And I hate to use the artificial intelligence word, but how do we use more of that capability and technologies to get analysts from having, or watching full motion video, right? Watching full motion video for hours, trying to pick out something, as opposed to using those kind of tools to say, look at these 5 minutes of frames. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that area.
Yeah, so Jim, when you said artificial intelligence, oftentimes I wonder whether my intelligence is artificial. Hey, I just want to make a point about this question. It's a great question. The data we have, we need to take advantage of. Gary's kind of alluding to it, right, with using artificial intelligence, machine learning. I just want to alert everybody to what's called Project Maven, which is run out of the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. The director of the Office for Soldier Integration is Lieutenant General Shanahan. There's a BAA on the street right now, which is addressing this very comment, and it's particularly vested in the full motion video case that Gary mentioned. But there'll be a big initiative coming out of the Department of Defense in this area. And I encourage any of you, if you're doing AI, machine learning, doing any kind of work in pushing processing to the point of need into the node, you might want to take a look at that BAA, because there'll be significant investment coming out of the department in the next few years in this area.
I would also add to that, and it's something that the Army's been pursuing but has struggled with, is algorithms to develop big data capability. So, I'm an Amazon shopper. It amazes me when I log onto Facebook. Facebook knows what I bought, and it says, hey, how about these 3 other things that are kind of like what you just bought that you might be interested in? That's really what we need in the Army, to collate all of that data across the intel domain, the mission command domain. How do we allow commanders to make effective decisions? You can't manually process all of that data, and I think that kind of gets to the point of that question. So how do we, what do we do? What are the algorithms that are needed, and who can help us to get there? It's something that is a requirement in the command post computing environment space, but has been deferred from this version that's being delivered in version 3 to sometime in version 4, which I think is like FY21. But I think that's something that we definitely have to get after.
Yeah, so one of the things that we are doing to not just get technical data and store it somewhere, right? We are working with contracting to develop language to get the right data that we need for long-term system sustainment. So as opposed to buying a whole total technical data package, right? We're assessing what is the right level of data that we need, depending on the system, right? Because it's not the same if it's a system that we're anticipating to only use for 3, 5, 10 years, to systems that we anticipate will remain in the Army's inventory for long term, and how we assess industry's ability to stay viable. So we did develop language that will allow us, working with industry, to have like an escrow account and together identify what supply challenges we anticipate we're going to have, and start gathering data for those specific components or parts, as opposed to getting all technical data for all parts or components of a specific system. So that language is already developed. It has already been implemented on some of our contracts, and we are anticipating we will continue to use, just to get your feedback on how that would work for you, right? How it would enable you to just keep or gather the data as we assess the need, as opposed to develop and just store technical data just to store in the event. So we're working that. It's really an experiment. Like I said, we're going to see how it works with a few contracts that we have already executed, and we'll probably expand it, because I think it does have a lot of potential.
So one other area where I think where we need to look to is in our supply posture. So I ordered a kayak from LL Bean a couple weeks ago, and I knew that the thing would ship in a week, right? So, but if a soldier requisitions a part, it's not clear to him when it ships. Goes on back order. I think the industry partners who are providing that supply don't have any visibility into our stockage or supply posture of those stocks. And if they had some means of understanding where we are for a given part, I think they could be much more proactive in addressing our problem. They only know that we need a part when we go put a contract, and then we have a 9-month lead time. I think we got to get to a point where we use data analytics to allow us, from a unit perspective, understanding supply, as well as having industry understand the parts that providing so we can turn things a lot quicker. Obviously, we're not there yet, but I think that's where we have to go to really get after this, to get after the concept or where we're going to have 100% supply availability, which means if I order a part, I get the part when I require it. And that's a big effort.
Thank you. The next question for the panel is, there has been much talk of operationalizing the Materiel enterprise to better support the sustainable readiness model and multi-domain battle. Can you address some examples of how the C4ISR enterprise is adapting to meet these challenges?
So I'll start from a hardware perspective. So actually, our headquarters, Army Materiel Command, working across the enterprise, has identified some initiatives to actually do that, right? How do we operationalize the support? And one of the things, or a couple of things that we are directly involved in, and of course, as part of the Army Materiel Command, have to respond to that guidance or directive actually, is to, one, we're looking to pre-position equipment where we believe it is going to be needed. That is a very significant effort because we are making a decision as an Army to put specific systems in specific areas in the event we need to fight tonight. So not only do we have to put the equipment there, the equipment has to be ready at all times so that it can be deployed in a 24, 48 hours time frame. So that is a challenge when a lot of our capabilities were brought back home. So most of the repair and sustainment capability is, in the US or some of our allied countries. So when we are putting some of our equipment in remote locations, because we anticipate we're going to need them there to be agile and responsive to a contingency operation, we also have to look at the tail end of that, which includes parts, repair, maintenance, and technical assistance. So we're looking at how we not only pre-position the equipment, how many and which parts we need to also have forward and available to the soldiers so that they can repair and do their maintenance actions in a timely manner. What a higher, in our case, we call it sustainment level repairs capability we have to put forward. We're working both with our organic capability, the depots, Tobyhanna, Letterkenny, and then also industry partners to put repair capability forward. And then our tech assist. Do we have our experts in the right place at the right time and able to respond? So synchronizing all those efforts is challenging, but we're already moving in that direction. It's going to take some time before we do it across our portfolio, but it's definitely moving in the right direction and it's moving fast.
I just want to add on to what Liz said. So just for context, under OfferGen, we had 6 months to repair or reset equipment. Under SRM, we have 90 days. And so we have some complex C4I systems that don't have a 90-day reset or repair cycle time. And so one of our challenges, how do we drive down that reset or repair cycle time? We need industry to help us when they design, develop systems that understand if we're going to do overhauls or reset, we can't afford to go beyond 90 days. That includes transportation from the unit back to the depot, Tobyhanna in our case, and back to the unit. So we are looking at maybe putting some floats forward or buying some repair cycle floats to help us with the process. But in the future, we have to really minimize the repair cycle time of these complex systems. And given this transition from OfferGen, where we had 6 months, not so big a problem but now with 90-day turnaround, it's a significant problem on a number of C4ISR platforms.
So I would like to add a couple of things to that. So from a contracts perspective, I would tell you, keep in mind a couple of things. industry, you have to help us understand your capacity. I mean, truly understand your capacity. That means not just your own as the prime contractor, but each of your subcontractors as well. What are your critical elements or critical points of failure? What are your single points of failure? All right, being able to explain that to us so we can better write contracts or plan and get information to you in a manner that better helps us. All right, that old term, help me help you. Well, I need you to help us help you back, okay? Because this is important. If I don't understand my industrial base well enough, I can't advise these people up here on what your true capacity and capabilities are. That whole market research phase that we conduct, the point of that market research phase is so that we can truly understand that industrial base and understand the max capacity, the timeliness, and or the challenges therein. So I need you to make sure that you're able to articulate that to us in a very succinct manner and fashion, especially during the market research phase and or when your proposal is being written. Identify your critical elements and stopping points or where potential critical bottleneck areas might occur. Thank you.
Thank you. Talking about standards, can you elaborate on how you see Cmos standards evolving over time?
So I think one of the questions I've gotten from at least a couple industry partners are, when you make standards decisions, a few years from now they'll be obsolete and you'll put us at a disadvantage. Standards evolve. We understand that. We are part of those committees as they evolve. Now, one of the challenges is to manage that, and that's besides making the decision, which I talked about before, having the Army manage that so we evolve with the standards. And there will be a day where there will be breakthroughs and we'll have to reconsider how we do that. But we understand that standards evolve. We're part of the commercial committees to help shape that and understand where they're going. And then we, again, look for you to help tell us where you think not only where we should be today, but where we should be tomorrow. I think Kenyatta kind of captured it when he said, let us know, are we putting you in a box, or are we disabling you or enabling you with those standards?
That was our final question for the panel. Thank you very much for those questions. Please join me in welcoming General Wood back to the stage.
Well, thank you. As I mentioned, a very technically savvy, qualified panel, really covering a variety of areas important to the Army. Mentioned a couple times the AUSA session, but AUSA is often a time for that announcement of the new strategy priorities, and the new directions that the Army intends to take. If any of us who've ever been in sustainment or logistics or been waiting on a part realize those are all challenges as they're described to us, but you can see this panel is taking it on head on, clear-eyed, and I think with a great amount of experience and insight, hopefully passed along to you. I heard opportunities flowing that may be available, a request for help and assistance, and also some channels to get back to the panel. I'd like to thank Larry and the panel especially for making that tough drive in tough traffic down here from Aberdeen. We wish you safe travels back, but more importantly, there's your motor pool out here. This is a variety of solutions for all of us to have a chance to go and look at the last opportunity we have with the floor open till 12:30. Our thanks to our exhibitors, our sponsors, as ever, bringing solutions forward, and frankly, the interface between industry and government so important to the business we do in AFCEA. Could I have a hand again for this panel? We really, really appreciate what you've done. And I would offer that Mr. Wesley definitely did a wrap-up act down there. He did a heck of a good job. It all flows, well, not downhill, it flows right to left, and really has to be executed. We are, on behalf of the panel, going to make a donation to the Fisher House. Thank you so much for your time.